Good morning, everyone. Just as a reminder, our chats are recorded and publicly available for viewing on our website. So if you may prefer to keep your camera off during the Q&A portion, you may so. I am Amber Hanover. I'm the Community Engagement Lead here at the Museums Association of Saskatchewan. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm coming to you today from Regina, which is located on Treaty 4 territory. MASS's work and support reaches lands covered by Treaties 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, currently known as the Province of Saskatchewan, comprised of the territories of the Naheilak, Anishinaabeg, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Métis, and Nakota nations. This land acknowledgement is an act of reconciliation and an expression of our gratitude to those whose territory we reside on and are visiting. MASS commits to explore our roles in nurturing meaningful relationships and building understanding. We dedicate our efforts to working together in a spirit of collaboration and reconciliation. We are all treaty people. Welcome again, everybody, to today's community chat. The MASS Online's personal development opportunity. It's a chance here to network with other museums and professionals to chat, ask questions, and seek advice. Today, I'm happy to introduce you to Tara-Leigh Heslip, the SaskCulture Outreach Consultant. The Museum Grant Program, MGP, provides operational funding to help foster strong, vibrant, community-based Saskatchewan museums that are valued and supported by society. This funding enables museums to focus on excellence in their programs and operations, and to contribute to the understanding of the world and our place in it, our past, our present, and our future. Whether you applied for the MGP program in the past or are applying for the first time, Tara-Leigh is here to help give you some helpful tips and tricks to put your best foot forward. Tara-Leigh will be doing a presentation with a chance for questions and a discussion to follow. Tara-Leigh, I will pass it over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you for inviting SaskCulture to do this presentation this morning. I see a lot of familiar names in the group of attendees, so it's wonderful to know that you all are on. If you're comfortable, throw in the chat what museum you're with, because it's always interesting to know who is on these calls. I'm also joined today by my colleague, Laura-Leigh, and some of you may have had emails or reached out to her in the past. She is our technology queen here at SaskCulture, and so we'll talk about a little bit about how she can support you as we go through this presentation today as well. So I will start to share my screen here pretty soon. And with that in mind, we'll be doing a brief overview of what the grant is. And that will be followed by some basic tips, just some basic grant writing tips that will help you not only with the MGP, but hopefully with other grants that you are also looking at applying for this year or in the future. Going to keep it fairly informal. So if you have a burning question that you really feel like you need to ask right away, you can certainly unmute your mic and interrupt me, or throw it in the chat, because I know Amber will be watching that chat and making sure that we get to all those questions near the end. The presentation part's probably about 30 minutes only, so we'll definitely get you out of here within that hour. Depending on how many questions you have, it could be very short or it could take a little longer. So as Amber said, the Museum Grant Program is an operational grant, and there are the 3 different streams that you can apply for, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about those streams. But we'll talk about just a little bit about that definition of museums. So this, of course, ties to the eligibility. So museums that can apply for this funding can be building-based, which, of course, maintain collections of historical or contemporary artifacts of importance, and often do a lot of amazing research and have these artifacts exhibited in an actual building. And then we can look at eco-museums, which are always a little bit harder to understand, but they are a unique mechanism for community engagement, and where your community members work to preserve and learn about the tangible and intangible heritage in its living form. So this is often done through community engagement, stakeholder meetings, and you look at those natural and cultural assets that are valued by your community. So unlike traditional building-based museums that have objects in it, instead it enables communities to preserve those valued objects and sites and cultural practices right where they exist and enhance their visibility and contribution to the community. Virtual museums are sort of that online format, so where collections are digitally recorded, sound files, text documents, and other data of historical and cultural importance and interest, and shared through virtual means. So those are the three types of museums that can be supported through this grant program. And then when we look at those three streams, I think first I'll note that when you're doing this application, you are applying for a 2-year cycle. So when it goes through the assessment process, you will get approval. Hopefully you'll get approval for both the 2024 year and 25 year, or however that lands within your fiscal cycle. You can only apply for one stream, so you will need to choose which stream fits best for you and for your museum. And the little chart that I have up here gives you a little bit of insight on the sort of typical operating income of museums that apply for each stream. So that first stream is you can apply for up to a maximum of $5,000. And 100% of that can be used for your operational expenses, and you do not need to have any matching funding or expenses to use that funding. And typically we see within this, museums that have a budget up to $65,000 a year will fall in that stream 1. Stream 2 museums can apply for up to $15,000, and stream 3 for up to $30,000. The difference here is that you will need to have matching funding, matching eligible expenses. So if you apply for $8,000, you will need to show that you have $16,000 worth of eligible expenses in order to utilize that full $8,000. And with all of these streams, when they go through the assessment process, it is a very competitive grant. So there's also no guarantee that you will receive the funding amount that you have requested. And for those of you that have applied in the past, you've probably certainly witnessed that. You may have received full funding, or you may have received a portion of what you have requested. And a lot of that has to do with how you've answered your questions. And when the assessors read through your application, if they deem that you are in competition with those other applications. So how are you stacking up against those? And that's something really important to keep in mind when you are choosing which stream to apply for too, because they do get more competitive as you go up. So now for actual eligibility, there's a couple of things to keep in mind here. So one, if you are a not-for-profit museum, you do need to be in existence for at least 1 year and have all your documents up to date with the Information Services Corporation. So you'll have your annual general meetings and submit your finances and documents to ISC on an annual basis. And your other option is if you have been formed by bylaw or through band council resolution and fall underneath those structures, that is the other option in terms of being an eligible organization. And in that case, if this is your first time applying and we don't have a copy of that resolution or bylaw on file, we will be asking for it. Now, there are some museums that are not eligible to apply under the MGP funding stream. So these are museums that are part of federal or provincial operation or a crown corporation. Or if you are a museum that receives a lot of Sask Lotteries Trust Fund funding. So if more than 50% of your revenue comes from Sask Lotteries, so that would be from SaskCulture. It would also be from the Community Grant Program or what many of you may still know as the TIPS program that your municipality or RM or band passes out. So those funds all are calculated in terms of the Sask Lottery's funding that you're receiving. Additionally, if you receive direct funding from the culture section of the Sask Lottery's Trust Fund, and lastly, if you receive funding directed by the government of Saskatchewan. If you have any questions about your eligibility, just contact me. That's probably the easiest way to go. Now, when we're getting into what you can expect on the applications, there's specific sections that you'll be required to answer within the MGP. So Stream 1 applications consist of a section on activities and impact, welcoming and inclusive museums. There's a new section on Indigenous objects and materials, risk management, budget, and budget notes. And the only document that you're required to upload is your financial statement. With streams 2 and 3, you have the same sections, but you will be required to give additional information, additional answers to the questions. So it is a little bit more detailed. It is a longer application to fill out for both of those streams. And you will also be required to upload a strategic plan or equivalent, your collections policy, a completed budget form, which the budget form is available right in the application, and you will download it. And I'll get Laura-Leigh to touch base on that a little bit later. And your financial statement, as well as a communication example. So I guess right there, if you don't have those documents ready to upload, you maybe aren't at the level to apply for stream 2 or 3. If you're maybe missing a collections policy and feel you have time to develop that fully prior to the deadline, you can definitely give that a shot. And I know that Mass has some great resources and can potentially give you a hand with that as well. So when you get to looking at the online application, the little sort of photo clip shot on the side shows you what that application looks like online. And you'll be asked to give an example of your activities and their impact. So you're going to be asked for a specific example in governance, in collections, as well as a programming example. And we really want you to take some time to tell your story here. Make sure you include the how, what, where, why, how, as well as why you're doing it. What is the need? What's the impact that you're hoping to achieve? We sometimes see these answers come in with just a very brief description of I'm doing this, but it doesn't really talk about why or how you're going to accomplish it. So when the assessors are reading that and weighing it against another application, it's going to be scored a lot lower, and that will impact the funding amount you receive, or if you receive it at all. Now, as I mentioned, there is a new section on Indigenous objects and materials. And this is a really important section, and I want to draw your attention to the fact that there is a requirement for you to complete the Indigenous Materials in Saskatchewan Museum survey that Mass had. I think it's been out for a couple of years, and they've been actively asking museums to fill it out. If that is not filled out prior to year 2 funding, you will not receive your second year of funding. So the link to that survey is directly embedded into our grant application. So even as you go online and you're in that section, if you have not filled out that survey, you can take the opportunity to do it right now. If you don't do it right now, you will have to do it within this next year, or you will forfeit your funding for year 2. So certainly if you have any questions about that, let me know. I will also make a note that if you don't have Indigenous materials and objects in your museum, you still need to fill out the survey, and it'll be super fast. You're just going to fill out and say that you don't, and then you'll be able to move on. So don't avoid doing it. It's the way that not only the Museum Association, but also SaskCulture will know sort of what supports are needed within museums and how to move some of this work forward for you. Now, the budget section is always a little tricky. And as I mentioned in stream 2 and 3, for those of you that have applied before, it's going to be that standard old budget form that you've seen over the years where you're going to download that Excel spreadsheet and fill it all in. We heard loud and clear from Stream 1 museums that it's too complex. It doesn't meet the needs and the capacity of the volunteer-run museums that we have. So we have tried to do something a little different here. It does make it look like there's a whole lot of extra pages when you go to fill out the grant, but you'll get to the budget section and there's going to be one page that will be revenue. And then there'll be another page for your expenses. And there's 6 pages in total. So you're going to have your current year, and then you're going to have your projected year 1 and your projected year 2. So with what we currently have as categories to fill out are, you're going to note your SaskCulture grant. So in year 1, of course, you're going to, or your current year, what you received this year for 2023. If you received any summer jobs grant, if you have any municipal funding, and your self-generated funds. And then there's the opportunity to add additional lines if you wish, if you can't bulk your revenues within those categories. Additional note is, so in that self-generated area, that's where you would put things like your admissions, donations, program registrations, fees, if you have gift store sales. All of those items can be bulked into that self-generated. If you wanted to break it down and show us your fundraising separately or donations separately, then you have the ability to add those additional lines. And for expenses, again, just a few categories. So you have your salaries and benefits, your eligible operating expenses, programming expenses, and then your capital expenses that are not eligible. So within your eligible operating expenses, we would expect to see things like your utilities, insurance, minor maintenance. And in all of these budgets, you will have budget note there, and take the time to fill that out. It gives the assessors a much clearer idea of how you're using the funds and a better picture of your overall operations. So within that budget note area, you might want to break out a note that we've paid this amount for insurance, we've paid this amount for some minor maintenance like painting and things along that line. And then once you get all those budget areas filled out, you'll of course have the basics, things like the acceptance of the grant conditions, and you'll get to payment options. And with payment options, we would really like to strongly encourage EFT. And you know what, I'll pause here because I see Angel has her hand up. I hope I said your name right.
Yes, this is Angèle speaking. Thank you so much, Tara-Leigh. Great presentation so far. My question is, I'm a bit confused about the budget screenshot that you just showed, because what I'm still seeing in the MGP login is exactly the same as what it used to be. So, but we're stream 2. So is this only?
Yeah, this is only stream 1, and we broke out this way. Stream 2 and 3 still have the more detailed budget to fill out.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you. So we are really wanting to strongly suggest that all museums sign up for the electronic fund transfer. And I'm actually going to get Laura-Leigh to say a few words about that.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm here to talk about the wonders and benefits of the electronic funds transfer, or you can think of like e-transfer might be something that you've heard before. There's some benefits. The biggest one is your check doesn't get lost in the mail. The money goes directly into your account almost immediately, once we've processed the payment. And I know there might be concerns about the security of your information. If you follow the instructions, we ask you to fill out a form, and it is called a vendor form. It's just a terminology. It just means, our client that's going to be being paid by EFT. We use it for a number of different administrative purposes in SaskCulture. So we don't have one specifically that says for like grant recipients or anything like that. So don't be thrown by seeing a request form for the vendor information. If you send that directly to Alejandra Coronel, our financial person, she should be the only one that sees it. If it gets sent to myself or Tara by accident, we don't even look at it. We just forward it right onto Alejandra without looking. We have very secure processes for that information, how that information is stored and kept and protected. So you shouldn't have any concerns. We ask you for your banking information and who the payment is going to. So we had, of all of those who applied and received MGP grants last year, we had over half of the museums actually sign up for the EFT process, and we would love to get us to like 100%. So we really strongly encourage you to do that. Like I said, you get your money right away, safe and secure. So if you have any questions, when you're working through it or wondering if it's right for you, just feel free to get a hold of me and we can chat more about that. Thanks, Tara.
Awesome. Thank you, Tara-Leigh. So then you will be required to do an interim follow-up report. And I just wanted to make note here that you need signed financials with that. And we really like to see some wonderful examples of the work that you've completed. So try and focus on the stories about that direct museum work. So the programming, the governance work, the collections work that you're doing. We get a lot of stories about the amazing fundraising activity and how that brings people into your museums and how successful those are, which totally understand you have to do that work to stay operating. But the stories that we're kind of looking for in that follow-up are more based on the core work and mission of the museum. And from that, we look internally, like our communications team looks at those too. And we like to try and pull out some stories and do some celebration stories on those in our Engage magazine. So you never know if you might get featured after sharing some of the great work that you're doing too. And that's kind of a point of pride to be picked out and have those stories shared throughout the entire province as well. So now we're going to get into just some very basic tips for grant writing. So one, if you are not signed into our online grant platform already, which we affectionately call the OGP, you'll want to create a user profile. If you are new and taking over for another volunteer on your board or are a new employee with your museum, and aren't connected to the museum's profile currently on our grant platform, then we want to get you set up as an individual user, but we don't want you setting up a new organizational profile, and we'll link you to that. So if you need to know the steps involved with that, certainly reach out to us. That's a lot of things that Tara-Leigh especially helps folks with. And I also want to encourage everybody to have more than one user attached to their profile. And there's a few reasons for that, but a big part of it is they can help to lighten the load. They can be the second signatory. They can review the grant to make sure that what you have written makes sense. You know your work so well in what you're writing that sometimes it's hard to know if it's being conveyed with a lot of clarity to others who will be reading your application afterwards. If you struggle with the technology, then certainly consider recruiting someone else to help. Maybe even there's a high school teenager that's willing to volunteer a few hours to sit down and fill out the application. We find quite often within the volunteer world, especially now, people are more willing to volunteer for those one-off short-term little jobs than to be committed long-term in a board position or things like that. So that is an area that you might be able to get somebody to just help you out short-term. And then in that stream 2 and 3, again, there are budget forms that you will download to fill out. And if you're having challenges with downloading those documents, Tara-Leigh, I don't know if you want to say anything about that at all.
Sure. I noticed using my own browser, I mean, these programs often do these updates in the background, and all of a sudden you'll notice you go to a screen and it doesn't look like the way it used to, or things don't operate the way they used to. One thing I noticed with, I think I have Chrome, they must have done an update. And before, when I would click download a file, it would just kind of pop up. There would be like a little box at the bottom of my screen. It'd be ready for me to click on and open the Excel document or something like that. What I've noticed now is that there is a little like download icon in the upper right-hand corner of my browser that I have to actually click on and then see the download there. So that's just something to watch if you are having problems downloading a document that we've asked you to download in the system. Just check your browser, check to see if they've made a change on how those documents download. But if you're really still struggling and it's just not working for you, please contact me. We can email you out the document, something like that. Make sure you get it. We'd rather that you call us right away than rather, struggle, get frustrated with the technology, because I'm here to help you navigate the technology requirements. Yeah, we want it to be a good experience for you. If you've got questions about how do I answer this question about my museum, that's certainly, to Tara. But if it's like, I'm trying to get a new user on there, I'm trying to, the upload's not working, any of those kind of technical questions, by all means, reach out to me.
Perfect. Thank you, Tara-Leigh. Yes, I want to reiterate that. We don't want you frustrated and almost in tears doing these applications or follow-ups. So don't hesitate to email us or phone us. We're here to support you and to help you do the best work you possibly can. Now, these additional tips that I'm going to go through, they're going to be relevant not only to the museum grant program, but to any grant that you might be filling out over the years. So first, if this is your first time writing a grant, don't worry, you can still be really successful if you follow a few key points. You really want to make sure that you spell out your need. So talking about the impact that the work that you're doing is really important. Use a storytelling approach. And I think it's really important to try and put yourself in the assessor's position and think about the fact that they are reading through, depending on the stream, they could be reading anywhere from 12 to 30 applications. And you are naturally weighted against those other applications. So how are you going to have yours stand out? What is going to keep the assessor's attention and ensure that your project is really easy to understand and grabs their attention? So additional tips with that is write short, hard-hitting sentences. So I know I get a little wordy, and if you've received emails from you, you might see how wordy I can get. Well, that's a bad move when it goes to filling out your grant application. And this is where it's great to have somebody review too and see if you can shorten those sentences, bring clarity to them in fewer words. Try not to use acronyms or highly academic words either. Just keep it nice and simple. What is the way that makes it easiest for somebody to read quickly and have clear understanding of what you're looking at? You might even want to consider doing point form. You'll want to make sure this one's maybe a little bit more so if you're applying for other grants, but really focus in on the specific project or program that you're sharing. And again, having that who, what, where, when, how, and why are all really important for the assessors to understand exactly what you're doing and the impact it will have in your community. So just a couple of examples of answers that we have seen come in on museum grant program applications. So for example, this might be in that programming and impact area, and you're describing what programming you're doing. So we certainly see answers where we will run a summer program for kids July and August. Just short, but really doesn't give any depth of information or understanding of how you're doing the program or why. Second answer for the same exact program, same museum, could be we will host free weekly summer program for ages 6 to 12. Each week we'll have a different theme that links to an exhibit. For example, one week we will focus on the Métis exhibit. We will have a local Métis elder share their knowledge and stories and teach finger weaving and jigging. And then to make that even better, it would be, why are you doing that? So that's just kind of a brief example of what assessors could be looking at and the type of answers they'll be weighting against each other. Additionally, in any grant application you're doing, strive to ensure that you are not doing activities or program that are tokenistic or are falling in that cultural appropriation side. So whether you're doing ethnocultural programming or programming around First Nation Métis, you really need to ensure that you are involving people from those communities at the forefront and at the core of the planning and putting those projects together. Sort of always live by the phrase, nothing about us without us. That's sort of a phrase that we use here internally at SaskCulture all the time. And as you're reading through any grant, make sure you pay really close attention to what is being asked for. So are there letters of support? You don't need letters of support for MGP, but for many other grant applications, you might. The signatures are a big one. And I can probably speak for both Tara-Leigh and I. We spend a lot of time following up with grant applicants who are missing authorization signatures, either on the application or also on the follow-up report. Do you have your nonprofit entity number if you haven't already created your organization on the online grant platform, and those budget details? Now, for specific project grants that you might be applying for, you might need very specific estimates. With the operational grant, you should be able to project your budget fairly clearly based on past years. And you make sure your budget is clear and it makes sense. And, you know, the assessors that are looking at these are peers and do have a very good understanding of how museums work and what kind of budget costs to expect. So you don't want to inflate your budgets or have them look unrealistic. And you also want to make sure that, again, that note area that I showed on that one slide, that you want to fill it out. So as I mentioned, that's where you can break out our operating expenses and it maybe include all of these elements to it. Programming expenses, you may have material, you might have elders honorarium, offsite venue rentals, things along that line. And if you do have a surplus or a deficit, then in that note area to explain why. So assessors are looking at if your museum is sustainable. So if you have a continually ongoing deficit, why is that? And how are you going to recoup from it? And if you have a large surplus, are you saving up for a project? Make sure to share that, because otherwise the assessors will look at that as well and think, well, these guys don't need this grant. They have loads of money that we can use the money for museums that are struggling a little bit more. And again, I can't reiterate this one enough. Recruit someone else to review your application. You know exactly what you're saying, but having a second or third set of eyes to look at it and make sure that what you're sharing is clear and that you have someone else can double check your grammar, punctuation, and the terminology and language that you're using. I always, again, like to think about this as putting yourself in those assessors' shoes, and they could be spending hours reviewing this application. And if they feel like they're putting in more effort reviewing your application than you put in writing it, that can be a bit of a problem. So you want to make sure that you have clear, concise answers that have been double checked and that keep the interest of the assessors. And don't procrastinate. The grant is live online, so you can be in there starting to answer. And for stream 2 and 3, you still have 2 months left to complete those. Stream 1, you have 3 months. So that'll give you some time to really think about how you're responding to those answers. If you're needing to do a little planning at your board meetings, or even back and forth conversations with your board members to figure out how to best answer those questions, you have loads of time to do it right now. I think we have over 40 museums that have already started their application with, I think, 3 or 4 that have already submitted them. So it's great to see that there's already that engagement. And again, if you have questions or struggling with logging in, reach out to Tara-Leigh or I, and we'll get you going. And yes, most importantly, reach out to us. We're here to support you. So on this last page here, you have my contact information as well as Tara-Leigh's, and you can find those directly on the SaskCulture website as well, and within the grant program too. So reach out to us. You can call us or email us, and we are more than happy to help you out and answer any questions that you might have. So that is what I had to share with you today, and I wanted to leave some time for some questions or general inquiries. And I know Sarah has asked about what a collections policy might look like for an eco-museum. So we'll get back to you, Sarah, on that, because that might be more of a mass question than a me question. Any other questions? Angel again, yes.
Thank you. Yes, Angèle here from the Sturgis Museum. My question is about the budget. And again, this is stream 2.
Yeah.
So is it correct that when the assessors are establishing how much will ultimately be granted, they're looking at 50% of the eligible expenses, right?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this quite right, if I'm understanding it. So if you're in stream 2 and you're applying for $15,000, they will be looking to make sure that you have $30,000 worth of eligible expenses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So, okay. So, I mean, we all know that labor costs are like a big ticket item.
Yes.
So what should go in the salaries and wages line? Should it be all dollars that went out to pay persons? Or should it be that number less the Canada Summer Jobs amount that we got, for example?
It'll be the full amount that you paid, because you will note in your revenue that you received a summer jobs grant as well. And
Exactly.
certainly that will be factored in. Like, they'll look for, so again, if you have applied for $15,000, they're going to look that your eligible expenses are $30,000 plus that student summer jobs grant. Like, it can't be doubled up.
Yeah, and that's why I thought that the wages amount should actually be the wages that we spent minus the grant.
No, because they
summer job.
still look at the fact that you've had that summer jobs grant too.
Yeah, because it's not like we're hiding it, like we're putting
No.
it on the revenue side, as you say. So,
yeah.
Okay.
And some museums don't get the summer jobs grant, or of course it doesn't cover the entire cost of your salaries either.
No.
So we still want to see that bigger picture.
Yeah. Okay, and then while I've got the microphone, one more question. In our write-up, nothing to do with budget now, if we're referencing a particular mass policy, let's say, should we like type out the entire policy in our little blurb box, or just reference it and move on?
You can reference it and put a little bit of detail, like just a very brief note, but again, the assessors will have access to that and will have some knowledge about a lot of those items. So there are only those specific, like just the collections policy is the only one that we're asking to see the full policy. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, but saying like policy number 5,
and
you
the
would want a
title,
little
like
bit
what it
more.
is.
Say what it is.
Kind of the title of it. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. And maybe just another note about the budget. especially your current year budget, will match your financial statement. So that's partially why you want that broken out that way as well, where you see that full salary and benefit and you see all of the grants in your revenue. Because you will also be uploading your financial statement. So the assessors look at that too. They'll look at your financial statement against your budget.
Okay, by budget, you mean actuals that you've accrued?
Yeah, because that budget form that you download for stream 2 and 3, that first column is your current year, like that's been completed, and then
Exactly.
projected year 1 and year 2. Laura-Leigh, did
Exactly.
you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, because then it also carries over to your follow-up report.
Yes.
So if you, in your application, excluded, say, like your example, the student works amount, but we would then be comparing it to your financial statement that you also submit. And then we'd say, well, why is it short the $5,000? So that's your official document. Your official document should match the budget that you're submitting. But for stream 2 and stream 3. For stream 1, again, we had made the much simplified budgeting tool for you instead. So it's not quite, I mean, we're still going to look at that. We're still going to look at your financial statement, make sure we can match those. But definitely when you're looking at those forms for stream 2 and stream 3, you want those numbers to all carry over throughout the course of the grant, and matching your financial statements when we've asked for those follow-ups.
And then I see Melanie has a question in the chat too. What is an acceptable equivalent to a strategic plan? So something along the lines of an annual work plan, a bit of a layout of the work that you have planned over the next couple of years. And again, that's where if you don't have that already, you have a couple months to get that pulled together with the board.
We do have a couple other questions here.
Okay.
One is, how do we find out who our grant advisor is?
That would be me and Laura-Leigh. Well, if you have, again, any questions about the actual questions in the grant and what stream you should be in, that goes directly to me. If you have technology questions like logging in or linking to your organization profile, or challenges with any of the uploads or downloads, Laura-Leigh is your go-to for those things.
Okay, great. And there was one more, and I'm not sure if you touched on this, answering Angeli. When you are referencing a policy, should you write it in the application, or do the adjudicators look it up?
Yeah. Just again, hopefully the previous answer did answer that, where reference it and then the title of it, and that would be good.
Yeah, we're from the same museum. That was
okay. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. If there's any more questions, feel free to raise your hand.
Can't find that hand raising thing, so.
Oh no, that's okay, Dorothy. Go ahead.
We do stream 1, and I opened my application yesterday just to see what it looked, if it was. And one of the questions is there a sponsoring organization for this? Now I have a question, because actually we were organized by an organization, but we have our own structure and so forth now, but it's the same people.
But you are, like, you're registered not-for-profit now?
Yes. And we have our own IC number, because the organization that organized us does not have all of that.
Yes, yeah. So I think it would just be whether in your organizational profile, if that is up to date with your nonprofit entity number and the proper name. Yeah. So that might be something that we need to work with you on offline, Dorothy, if that needs to be updated.
I'm good with all that stuff, but
okay, yeah, then you don't need to worry about a sponsoring organization.
Okay, good, thanks.
But I was just going to mention that the sponsoring organization is built into our processes, and it's for those organizations who don't meet the standard eligibility criteria, but that we want to make sure that they can move forward with their project that they're working on. And for MGP, that is that you're registered with ISC, that you have your nonprofit number, so you can either be that kind of organization, or that you are kind of supported through your municipality, and we've kind of talked about that, and that you have the bylaw on file and everything like that. Sometimes for MGP, we might use that field if, say, your museum is like the NICAM Museum and Historical Society, but the check actually needs to be paid to the town of NICAM. So if you're in that situation where you're a municipal owned museum, but you have your own museum name, but the money needs to be made out to the town or something like that, that's where we would use that sponsoring organization. So it's really about that financial relationship, about where the money goes. And it's not necessarily about, oh, this organization helped us get started or anything, unless there's that financial oversight that they're doing with your organization. So if you ever have any questions about where's my check going to go, we've got a certain situation, talk to Tara and I, and we can help and make sure you're set up right. So if you need an alternative payee, then what's your name of your museum, we can set you up, because then our system pulls that information automatically from that field. So that's really what that field is all about.
Thank you, Tara-Leigh. That was a much better answer.
And I did just put into chat regarding the question of how to access the YouTube recording of this. So we do have all of our recordings made available once I get them uploaded directly on our website, which you can watch them directly on there, but as well as they will be shared in our ephemera and social media. But you may also email me directly, community@saskmuseums.org, and once I get it uploaded, I will directly share you that YouTube link.
And we will also be embedding it right into the grant application too. So there'll be a link in the grant application for anybody who wants to review any bits or pieces of it.
And just going back to Sarah's question regarding collections policy and whatnot, do feel free to email our Sarah, our museums advisor, at advisor@saskmuseums.org if it has anything to do outside of the grant itself, which is SaskCulture, but anything to do with any of your internal policies or any of those things that might be expected. And she's put that in the chat for you, so that email is there. But again, any of those types of questions, you can reach out to myself or Sarah, and we'll direct you in the right direction. And also we are in communication with SaskCulture, Tara-Leigh especially, a lot. So if there's any cross communication that needs to happen, we are more than happy to direct you along where it's needed. So we'll do our best so you're not stressed, you're not confused, and also, like Tara-Leigh said, reiterating, you know, we don't want you pulling your hair out. We're here to support you in all of these steps, as painful as grant applications can be for many. That's kind of our role in a support as well. So again, working very closely with SaskCulture in this. So I'm not sure if anybody has any more questions or comments or anything. In the meantime, I just really like to thank Tara-Leigh and Lorelei for being here today. This is awesome to kind of do that breakdown. Again, we'll make this available on our YouTube channel, and you can watch it again to kind of note some of those tips or tricks. And if there's anything that stood out that you do have specific questions about, please, again, don't hesitate to contact any of us for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. And yes, I could, do you have a listing to send out the slides if I sent you the PowerPoint?
Just send it to me, and then just email community@saskmuseums.org, and I'll just send it out. Unless you want us to include that. Anyway, we'll talk about that for the PowerPoint slides, because I know some people's clicking through might be better, but yeah, just reach out to me.
Yeah, I just see Watrous Manitou is asking for it. So
yeah, we can. I saw that too. So we will just email myself, and I'll be in contact with Tara-Leigh with that, and we'll get that to you for sure.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.